AskReddit by Cows 1999. What are some that was way too close moments in history? 2012 coronal mass ejection. The most powerful solar storm in 150 years occurred on the 23rd of July 2012. Scientists claim that the storm could have knocked out the entire modern world if it had arrived 9 days earlier. Luckily for us, it didn't hit as the Earth was in a different position along its orbit. So the Mayans were right, but their calculations were a little off. Cuban Missile Crisis. Actually, we came closer on a later date. The 26th of September 1983, the launch detection in a Soviet bunker malfunctioned and showed an American nuclear launch. The engineer twice dismissed launch warning because of the low number of missiles it showed. In his mind, American wouldn't launch only 5 missiles at a time, so he did nothing, and we're all alive today because he was rational. Here's to you, Stanislav Petrov. A lot of these are recent. It's weird to think about the times in prehistory where the human population was probably under threat due to supervolcano or disease or whatever, but we didn't have the knowledge or skills to record any of it. And we survived by the global version of the skin of our teeth. Example: https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/tobar_catastrophe_theory. I think in generic records there was a bottleneck that implies we dropped to a tiny population and regrew. After WW1, the RMS Olympic was brought back to H&AMP W for a refit and modernization program. During this time they found a massive dent in the plates below the waterline that was determined to be a torpedo hit that had failed to detonate. If the torpedo had detonated, the ensuing disaster would have been on par with the RMS Lusitania or her sister ship RMS Titanic. That deverb in an insane situation if all 3 Olympic-class liners sank in major tragedies. 2 out of 3 was still bad enough. The oil well fires in Kuwait almost gave us a taste of what a nuclear winter would be like. Blowing the fires out with a MiG engine and dousing them with a gas turbine turned out to be the heavy hitters in fixing the issue. This was actually important in discrediting the nuclear winter theory, because at the time it was believed that a volcanic winter was caused by ash. The fact that the Kuwait oil fires didn't cause notable cooling helped us understand this wasn't true, and that it's actually caused by sulfur aerosols. Chernobyl disaster in 1986, narrowly avoiding a catastrophic meltdown with global consequences. Pictures from it are so crazy to me you can see the radiation in the film. Apollo 13 in 1970, when an oxygen tank exploded. Astronauts were stranded in space with little hope. It was nearly a disaster, but their teamwork and clever thinking saved them. They should do a movie about that. The Carrington event was a massive solar storm that happened in 1859 and directly struck the Earth. If something like it had happened, or does happen, today, it will radically affect civilization by physically destroying or incapacitating most of our modern technology. 2012, one almost hit us, and it was a Carrington-level solar storm. It missed Earth by like 9 days. Can you imagine if it had hit in the year that Mayans had predicted the world was gone to end? It would have been wild. Removed. That's great, Nap. I'm still here, in my pajamas, asking for some help. Pittacus of Epirus famously won a battle that was so close and cost so many men on both sides that he opined, "One more victory like that, and I am lost." It may be apocryphal, but it is where we get the phrase Pyrrhic victory. Hitler diverting much of the Nazi forces assaulting Moscow to the south to help the siege of Stalingrad. Might have broken Soviet morale and changed the entire Eastern Front if they took Moscow. Then the Nazis might have focused more on building Fortress Europe defenses and gotten access to more oil raw materials. They might never have lost the war. Frightening thought. I heard they didn't even need to capture Stalingrad for a victory in Russia. Hitler just wanted to take Stalin's city as a symbolic victory moral boost. They were heading south towards oil fields and Stalingrad was on the way. Hubris. Lots of oil-related close calls in WWII. The Japanese wanted to invade and secure the Dutch Indies for the oil, but top brass decided to take out US power in the Pacific beforehand, especially since the US was occupying the Philippines at the time, right next to Indonesia. Yamamoto thought attacking the US was a bad idea, but the decision wasn't ultimately up to him. The more I learn about World War II, the more I realize the whole situation was way too close to the Axis succeeding. WWII was won by British intelligence, American steel and Soviet blood. But yes, there were multiple instances of the Axis powers coming ever so close to achieving major victories, but they often befell themselves owing to their own mistakes, and sometimes plain stupidity and paranoia. Hitler thinking generals were sabotaging and ignoring his orders, so taking as much control as he could. The biggest one for me is the Battle of Midway, where the likelihood of victory swung wildly and quickly either way between Japan and the US Navy, and yet ended with a total military disaster for the Japanese, who arguably had the better fighting force that day, and the US emerging with sustainable losses and an absolutely unfathomably major victory. Japan lost all of its aircraft carriers in a matter of hours and, if I'm not mistaken, never recovered those losses for the entire war. The British almost colonized the Philippines as part of the 7 Years' War from 1756-1763, a British expeditionary force led by Admiral Samuel Cornish and General William Draper attacked Manila in 1762, hoping to gain a strategic foothold in the region and establish their dominance over the Pacific trade. The Spanish forces offered little resistance, and after a fierce battle, the British took control of Manila for 2 years. During this period, the British attempted to establish a colonial government and negotiate a permanent settlement with Spain. However, the Treaty of Paris in 1763 ended the 7 Years' War, and as a part of peace settlement, the British was forced to return Manila to Spain. The 26th of September 1983. During the Cold War, an alarm went off in a Soviet command center that the US had launched 6 nuclear missiles. A lieutenant colonel named Stanislav Petrov judged that it was a false alarm and refused to launch a retaliatory strike. That man single-handedly saved the world from nuclear war. Was going to mention this as well, such a crazy story. There are a number of near misses on nuclear war. McNamara went and talked, years later, to people involved in the Cuban crisis, and his conclusion was that we lucked out. One very important discovery was that while there were supposed to be various safeguards on the Soviet side, actually these were being bypassed. This should give us pause when we see comments that, oh well, it would still have been stopped by ZIS. Another. In 1940, the British government had to decide whether to continue the war or investigate the possibility of a peace. Hitler might have given what seemed reasonable terms because he wanted to turn toward Russia, and could deal with the British Empire later. If Britain had settled, the chance of Germany winning the war would have been quite a lot higher. Later Churchill liked to imply everyone was united for carrying on, but in fact he had to maneuver, and without the Labour members of the war cabinet he might have been outvoted. For American readers, a prime minister is not like a president who makes the decisions alone with the cabinet only advising. Amy Schumer was originally meant to star in a Barbie movie, but it got canned. Would have been the biggest bomb in theaters that summer. 1973, the Yom Kippur War. Israel had their backs against the wall and they were ready to go nuclear. The US had to resupply them or else they would have gone nuclear. In retaliation for the US resupplying Israel, the Soviet Union deployed tactical nuclear weapons to Egypt. In retaliation, the US deployed tactical nuclear weapons in Vietnam, with the intention of marching on Hanoi with full tactical nuclear support if nuclear weapons were fired in the Middle East. 1961, Goldsboro B-50 to crash. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/1961_Goldsboro_B-52_crash. Information declassified since 2013 has showed that one of the bombs was judged by nuclear weapons engineers at the time to have been only one safety switch away from detonation, and that it was credible to imagine conditions under which it could have detonated. One safety switch away from disaster. In 1983, Stanislav Petrov received a nuclear early warning missile warning that missiles from the US were heading towards the USSR. He decided it was a false alarm and didn't start the process for retaliation. It was later revealed that, most likely, there would not have been a retaliatory attack by the Soviets as they would have wanted further confirmation, but some people believe he saved the world from all-out nuclear war. Edit. Because of that, I changed my answer. In 8th grade, I accidentally almost brushed Sally McNeilson's epic boobs. I was just turning around and waving at the field to tell someone that there was his friend playing basketball, and I almost made contact when I turned around. Now, you may think, is that really a moment in history? Well, if you saw her act at a 13-year-old, you'd immediately agree. These are the kind of teachers I hate. In 1797, HMS Minerve, a lone British frigate in the Mediterranean, blundered into an entire hostile Spanish fleet including 25 ships of the line in foggy weather. Fortunately, none of the Spaniards noticed her and she was able to escape, link up with the main British fleet and report the Spanish movements leading to battle shortly afterwards. Minerve's captain was one Horatio Nelson. When they thought that it might theoretically be possible that testing the atomic bomb would start a reaction that would ignite and burn the entire atmosphere of our planet and tested it anyway. I would say that was a big phew moment when it was over. That's just a myth. Someone brought up the idea and before they tested, calculations were made and showed the odds of it happening were not significantly different from zero. Our human ancestors nearly went extinct 930,000 years ago. There were 1,280 breeding humans at one point and we all come from them. 20 ancestors. Human percent 20 ancestors percent 20 clothes percent 20 to percent 20 extinction. This is why I believe you can meet the same person, but in different people and from different races. I'd swear they were cut from the same pattern in the people factory. The events aboard the Soviet B-59 sub off the coast of Cuba, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We like to think that Kennedy and Khrushchev averted disaster, but it was Vasily Arkhipov who single-handedly prevented nuclear war. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Vasily. Probably the same ones that were mentioned when this question was upvoted last week. https://old.reddit.com/r/what_was_the_all_time/closed bracket Away with ye karma farming bots. We nearly destroyed all plant life on Earth using a genetically engineered bacterium. https://www.earthisland.org/journal/index.php/magazine/entry/a_biological_averted TL.dr version. A German company wanted to turn wood pulp into ethanol using a common soil bacterium. It worked really well in the lab, it was all set to be used in field trials, until someone thought to try it in a soil with living plants. The ethanol killed the plants, the bacterium ate the plants and made more ethanol. If released it would have spread uncontrollably and end all plant life, and thus all life. Crisis averted by one researcher carrying out a test he was told not to. Although some also maintain that it never happened. https://geneticlitteracyproject.org/2023/07/14/here-story-gmo-almost-destroyed-world/closed bracket but then They would have good reasons to say that.